Hello, and welcome to this episode of Behind the Docs, presented by Evan Guthrie Law Firm. And I'm your host, attorney Evan Guthrie. And today we're going to go over the last will and testament of Malcolm McCormick, better known as rapper Mac Miller. And Mac Miller passed away in September 2018, and then later on in that month, his will was probated in Los Angeles County, California. So part of the estate administration process and probate is the will is submitted to the court, and at that point it's public record, so we can take a look at it. And today we're just going to go over the highlights of his will. So the first part is just going to be the preamble, where it just says, I, Malcolm McCormick, and then it just says he's a resident of Los Angeles, California. So you make a will in the place where you're a resident of, the county you're a resident of. Being a sound mind, disposing memory, so he was able to have the capacity to make the will. And then this is his last will and testament, so he didn't have any wills made after this. And then most likely this was his first will that he made. It was November 2013, so almost 5 years before he passed, that he made his will at sort of age 21, 22. So he's pretty responsible to have this in place. And then the type of will this is it's going to be what's called a pour-over will. So at the same time he made this will, he also made a living trust. So this is kind of just a complement to that living trust, but you make a will at the same time just to take care of some other issues that might pop up as far as that. So there's not going to be too much information that's in this will, but it still has some key features that we'll go ahead and highlight. So the first one, and one of the most important ones, is going to be the appointment of personal representative. So the personal representative is going to be the person in charge of the estate, or the executor. So they make all the decisions. They have all the legal authority to be able to control all aspects of the estate and make important decisions on how it's administered, and making sure all the paperwork is submitted on time, and really just make all the important decisions for the estate. And then probably why this is important, because it's going to be an ongoing estate. So a lot of times, especially music artists, is they have a sort of a estate that doesn't die when they die. They keep earning money. They keep having money coming in as far as digital rights and any kind of unreleased albums. And then they also now have streaming rights. So more than likely, the streaming money is going to keep coming in perpetuity. So you want to name somebody that's really responsible to be able to manage this ongoing estate, which could potentially last forever. So the person he named is David Burns. So he calls him his friend, David Burns. So usually when you list your choice for personal representative, you got to name the relationship. So it's my mother, my father, my brother. In this case, it's his friend. And in this case, his friend is going to be also his lawyer. So David Britton is an entertainment attorney at Zifrin Brittingham LLP in Los Angeles. So his main area of practice is entertainment law, and he helps represent music artists and he says top level superstars, global recognized superstars. So that's going to be Mac Miller in this case. So probably what happened at this point is, early on in his representation, he kind of probably took Mac Miller by the side and says, hey, you need to make a will. You need to get this in place so we can better represent you. So that was probably a really good move by David Burns, that he was able to get this will in place and make sure that his family is protected. So really good representation there, because you have a lot of music artists that don't really take care of their business, don't have the sort of the right responsible people in place to sort of sit them down and make sure that they're taken care of. And another example would be right before Mac Miller passed away is Aretha Franklin. She passed away and she never made a will. So, and you kind of have quotes by some of the entertainment lawyers that she worked with, is they kind of begged her to get this taken care of, but then for a reason she never got taken care of. So good on David Burns sitting down with Mac Miller and make sure that he made his will and it was taken care of. So also a really responsible choice, probably, to get an attorney involved, is, again, probably it's going to be an ongoing estate. So just like he represented Mac Miller while he was alive, is a lot of times the estate is going to keep earning, so he's still going to protect his interests even after his death, and make sure that all the money goes to the proper places and that nobody's taking advantage of the estate. Because a lot of times when somebody's passed away, you may not have the most sophisticated person that knows about all these sort of revenues that are coming in, or if someone makes a bootleg album or tries to exploit his image, or make sure that his image and all his rights are protected and all that money goes to the right place, which in this case would probably be his parents and then his other family. So definitely a good choice as far as a personal representative. And then, his backup, just in case. So you always want to name a backup when you name a personal representative. It's going to be his brother, Miller McCormick. So in that case, it didn't follow that, but David Burns was his appointed personal representative. But you just always want to name a backup just in case. Make sure that just in case that you're protected. So number 2 is going to be ancillary administration. So what that says is, for any reason, the estate goes over to multiple states outside of California. So let's say that he had a house in his native Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, that he had to take care of, or anything else that he had to chase down, whatever money that was owed to him in Florida or New York or any other state, is that he'd be able to open an estate there and collect that money and make sure that anything that needed to be done is taken care of. So David Burns would be his personal representative not only in California but in any other state that had to be opened in any other location. And then number 3 is going to be administration of real property. So most likely all the real property is going to be any house, any land, or any other sort of residence is going to be administered by the terms of the living trust, which was created at the same time. So all the assets are most likely in the living trust, but for any reason, if any of the assets did not go into the living trust, is that this provision would allow him to be able to manage that real property without any sort of court order. So if it's not in the will specifically named, a lot of times you have to get a court order to be able to manage or sell or buy or transfer any real property. So it just gives him the power to do that. So it's an important provision to have in the will, even though it may not be necessary, to make sure you have it in there. And then number 4 is going to be payment of debts and taxes. So a lot of times you never know, as far as musical artists, what kind of debts they owe, or what kind of, if they have like any pending lawsuits, or have to settle any lawsuits, or any sort of funeral expenses, or also any taxes. So a lot of times Mac Miller was a high earning individual, so he earned multi-million dollars per year. So he owes a lot more taxes, and also taxes in a lot more locations than your average person would, because he always going on tour. You might owe taxes in New York. So if you perform in New York City, they're going to want to collect their taxes. So just settling all those things, and a lot of times probably David Burns, the personal representative, is probably going to delegate all that authority to an accountant or CPA to be able to handle all that and make sure all this tax situation is taken care of. And then most likely there's no death taxes or federal estate tax. He's probably under that amount as far as doing that, but just in case, you can make sure to pay that. And then a lot of times, this is the first reference as far as the taxes or debts to the Malcolm McCormick Revocable Trust. So he made a living trust during his lifetime. At the same time, he made this one. So the probate estate that would be handled by the will most likely does not have any assets in it that can pay any debts or taxes, but the Malcolm McCormick Revocable Trust, the living trust, probably holds all the assets. So this provision right here gives the personal representative the power to dip into that trust and pay any debts or taxes that are owed. So it's really good to have that provision in there just to make sure that all those taxes are owed, and then so the IRS or anybody else doesn't have any ongoing litigation, or it can be able to be wrapped up and paid. And let's just make sure that everything's taken care of. And then the other big part is number 5, disposition of residuary estate. So the residuary estate, so in this will, it's a poor will, it doesn't name anything specific bequest, like my house goes to my parents or my car goes to my brother. It just says everything goes to living trust, and then it's administered by there. So it's going to make sure that if there's any assets that were not transferred during Mac Miller's lifetime, that this moves all those assets into the trust, and then it can be administered and distributed according to the instructions of the trust and not the will itself. So it's just, this is what makes it a pour over will. So it just pours over all the assets into the trust, and then you're able to go from there and administer them. And number 6 is going to be powers of personal representative. So it just makes sure that any powers that are given under applicable law are able to apply in this case. And then number 7 is going to be severability. So that means that if any provisions are sort of deemed invalid or void, that the rest of the will is still valid. So it's just make sure, sort of a COIA's things to make sure the rest of the will is valid. And then number 8 is going to be waiver of requirement inventory and accountings. So usually in a typical estate administration, a probate court process is you have to do inventory, which means that you're sort of listing all the assets of the estate and then the values, the fair market values of all the assets. So he's just sort of waiving that process and do that. And then the accounting is making sure that every dollar is paid in and out of the estate. So any debts that are paid from the estate are taken care of, and then any money that comes into the estate. So if he's still accruing money as far as album sales or any kind of rights, digital rights that are coming in, that they're able to be taken care of. So it's making sure that all that money is going to the right place. So making sure, unless anybody else wants to require that those accountings be made, they're able to do that. All right, and then the last part is just going to be the signature part. So Mac Miller was able to sign his will, and then again you see the date, 12th day of November 2013, the same day as his revocable living trust was made. And then you're going to have the witness part. So just to make sure it's a valid will, in California you need 3 witnesses, and then it says each one's over 21 years of age, and then you have the 3 witnesses here. And then also it's just saying that Mac Miller was over 18 at the time of his will, and he's of sound mind, and he's not acting under any duress, menace, fraud, misrepresentation, or undue influence. So just making sure that all these witnesses made sure that he wasn't being taken advantage of, or his entertainment lawyer was not making him sign this under duress or against his will. So again, that's making sure you want to have a valid will that's able to do that, be admitted to court, and then it was admitted to court, so everything was valid in place. So again, that's going to be it for the will, and probably just comments. It's really good to see that Mac Miller, his estate, and his family was taken care of by getting this in place, and then also having the trust in place. So probably had a really good entertainment lawyer that was able to make sure this is all taken care of and doing that. And probably lastly, just shout out to The Blast, theblast.com, for providing this legal document. I guess they went down to the probate court, and even though it's public record, we just want to give them credit for doing that. All right, well, thanks for listening in to this episode of Behind the Docs. My name is Attorney Evan Guthrie, and we'll see you next time.